To our friends from other nations, our former president Rodrigo Duterte was heavily criticized in the international community, often portrayed as a ruthless figure, a monster to some, due to his strong and controversial approach to the war on drugs during his term. Many international media painted him as a murderer, blaming him for the deaths that occurred under his leadership. But if you want a clearer picture, you have to hear it from a Filipino. Filipinos affectionately call Duterte Tatay Digong, with Tatay meaning father and Digong being his nickname. Why? Because many Filipinos saw him as a father figure, one who, like a loving parent, provided security, care, and protection for his people. Under his leadership, we felt safe, secure, and valued. He strengthened our sense of dignity and national pride in ways that many outside our country may not fully understand. The Philippines had long been plagued by crime, corruption, and poverty, burdens that caused Filipinos to suffer for decades. Illegal drugs were easily accessible, trapping many of our youth in addiction. Even for those fortunate enough to keep their children away from drugs, peace of mind was still elusive. Our streets were unsafe, our children fell victim to robbery and kidnapping, our women faced the horrors of assault, and many were even killed by drug addicts who roamed freely. For years, we endured this suffering, so when Duterte campaigned with a promise to eradicate crime and drugs, Filipinos believed in him. Why? Because he had already proven his capability as mayor of Davao City in the southern part of the Philippines, which is known for its strict implementation of laws, cleanliness, and safety. Davao City earned the reputation as one of the safest and most progressive cities in Southeast Asia under Duterte's leadership, a stark contrast to the chaos in many parts of the country. And true to his word, he did what he promised. He relentlessly pursued the drug lords and criminals who were destroying our children, our future, and our nation. Yes, his methods were controversial. To the international community, he was often painted as a monster, and in some ways, he was. But that is because the Filipino people needed, begged, and expected him to be one. He became the kind of leader who could take on the monsters that had long tormented our country. After all, do you really expect drug lords and criminals to simply abandon their trade because the government politely, legally, and humanely asks them to? No. Fighting such deep-rooted evil requires an iron hand. Sometimes it takes a monster to destroy a monster. And I believe many political leaders around the world would understand this reality. But did Duterte really order his police force to kill? Well, didn't he publicly say, "I will kill you"? You have to understand that President Duterte is a lawyer, and not just any lawyer, but someone with a deep understanding of the legal system. Duterte served as a prosecutor for over a decade before entering politics. Specifically, he worked as a government prosecutor in the Philippines Department of Justice from 1977 to 1986, gaining first-hand experience with the realities of crime and the justice system. This exposure profoundly influenced his tough-on-crime approach as both mayor and president. Now, do you honestly believe that someone with such vast legal expertise, whose actions and decisions as president were thoroughly documented, would explicitly say, "Kill them"? Think about it. Duterte understood the power of his words. While he often spoke in strong, blunt language, he also knew the limits of what the law would allow. His statements were often more about sending a message, one of unwavering commitment to ending crime and drugs. It was about deterrence. But what about the so-called bloody war on drugs? What about the victims? I understand the plight of those labeled as victims in this relentless battle against drugs, but let's not forget, the Philippines was a nation plagued by addiction, a country drowning in the grip of narcotics. Duterte was a leader with unwavering resolve, and as a leader, he had to make difficult, even brutal decisions. Our fellow men, those who turned to drugs as an escape from the unforgiving realities of life, were not just casualties of the war on drugs, they were also victims of a much deeper, more insidious social disease, one that had festered long before Duterte took the helm. And Duterte understood this. Despite his blunt and brutal words, one of the key initiatives under his presidency was Oplan Tokang, a campaign designed to encourage drug users and pushers to surrender to authorities. He repeatedly warned them, surrender or face deadly consequences. Time and again Duterte made public statements urging drug users to abandon their ways, his words laced with fire and fury. He did not mince words, he did not sugarcoat his message. With strong, often graphic language, he drove home his unwavering determination to rid the country of illegal drugs, no matter the cost. Guess what? Over 1.7 million Filipinos involved in illegal drugs, both users and pushers, surrendered to authorities. The majority were drug users who sought refuge from the looming threat of harsher penalties or violence. Many of these surrenderees were placed under community-based rehabilitation programs or required to report regularly to local authorities, marking a significant yet complex chapter in the country's war on drugs. But what about those defiant and ruthless individuals who refused to abandon the drug trade despite Duterte's relentless warnings? He knew all too well their audacity and determination to fight back. And so, the war on drugs began. And like any war, innocent lives were inevitably caught in the crossfire, families torn apart, dreams shattered in the relentless fight for a drug-free nation. Even Duterte's staunchest supporters grieved for them, mourning those who had no ties to the drug trade yet became its unintended victims. But Duterte did not turn a blind eye. While he stood firmly behind his policemen, he did not hesitate to hold law enforcers accountable when they abused their power or harmed the innocent. In his war, there was no room for corruption or reckless violence, only the relentless pursuit of his vision, no matter how ruthless the path. There will always be arguments and controversies over how Duterte waged his war on drugs. Like any war, it brought suffering and pain, an unavoidable cost in the pursuit of a greater goal. Are wars truly fought for the betterment of humanity? That question will forever remain unanswered. But as a Filipino who has seen the devastating grip of drugs on my country, I know this: an iron hand was necessary. It was never a perfect strategy, it was never an easy path, but I felt the change, the very change that millions of Filipinos had longed and prayed for. So whether Duterte was good or evil, one thing is certain: we needed him to make that change. And Duterte answered that call. He relentlessly pursued that change, unwavering in his mission, undeterred by criticism, and unshaken by the storm of controversy. He did what others only spoke of but never dared to do: love him or hate him, question his methods or commend his resolve. One thing is certain: he reshaped the nation, leaving a legacy that cannot be ignored. During Duterte's term, there was both peace and fear. Peace for law-abiding citizens who could finally walk the streets without constant worry. Peace for overseas Filipino workers who had left their families behind, knowing that someone was protecting their loved ones back home. Peace for Filipinos who wanted to stay out late at night, confident that Duterte would not tolerate anyone who dared harm his law-abiding fellow citizens. And then there was fear fear for drug addicts who preyed on the innocent, fear for kidnappers who once operated without hesitation, fear for scammers who thought they could exploit Filipinos. Why? Because Duterte made it clear, if you destroy my country, I will kill you. His leadership was decisive, his words firm, and while the world may have questioned his methods, for many Filipinos, he was exactly the kind of leader we needed. So, for those who wonder why Filipinos, both in the Philippines and across the world, gather in protest to show their unwavering support for a so-called monster like Duterte, the answer is simple. Filipinos love him. World leaders should envy President Rodrigo Duterte because Filipinos would go through fire for him. He was not just a leader to us, he was our protector, our defender, our hope, our dignity, and our pride. And no amount of international judgment can change what he means to the Filipino people. Duterte made us understand that we are not Filipinos for nothing.